I am really someone who values equity. I think that our circumstances of birth shouldn't determine our futures, that our identities around the race, ethnicity, gender that we're born into shouldn't predetermine the outcomes for us, that we should all have equitable opportunities to flourish and thrive.
Change the Real with Monique Velasquez
and Piper Kessler.
For more than 20 years, we've worked in video production behind the scenes, helping mission-driven organizations and leaders.
This podcast exists for leaders who know their stories matter and are ready to stop guessing and start using video strategically to further their mission.
Not just fill a content calendar.
Each month, we drop 2 types of episodes.
One with Piper and I kicking it, sharing production insight from our own work,
and another featuring real stories about using media to create change
and connection. This is Change the Real.
Representation starts here.
Hey y'all.
I'm Monique Velasquez.
And I'm Piper Kessler. Today we're here in the studio with our friend, Katherine Turner. We know she is a champion of equity in health spaces and working with leaders as they contemplate their missions and goals.
But not just in the health spaces, in all kinds of spaces for leaders.
Katherine is the founder and president of Global Citizen LLC, a strategic equity-centered consulting, coaching, and training for transformation firm, and adjunct professor in leadership systems and design thinking, global health equity, and intercultural competence. She is an internationally recognized consultant, leadership coach, trainer, speaker, board member, and social change agent who has worked in English, French, and Dutch in more than 50 countries, spanning 5 continents. Global Citizen LLC celebrates with leaders in all sectors across the United States and worldwide to develop high-performing leaders and teams, conduct strategic assessments, visioning, planning, and execution, drive organizational transformation to align vision, mission, values, policies, strategies, and culture, and deliver high-impact results for a better world.
We love that. Well,
I couldn't have said it better.
Welcome to Change the Real, where representation starts
here.
So, global. I love Global Citizen. I love that you are like 50 countries in different languages, in different places.
Yeah.
If you were going to give flowers, who would you give flowers to that encouraged you, helped you along your entrepreneurial journey? And it could be somebody you don't know, somebody you haven't met.
Right.
Who would that be?
So many people to give flowers to.
That's good.
Yeah, I love to give flowers and I love to receive flowers. I'd start with my family. So my beautiful blended family, my son Jaden, my former partners Valerie and Jackie, and this incredible, beautiful blended family that we created. And it's a multiracial, multi-ethnic, multi-sexual orientation, gender identity family. And so our family and what we've done and what we've had to endure to create this beautiful family in a world that doesn't see and recognize families like ours or actively discriminates against them has been a real inspiration for me to work to create a better world, which is our tagline. And then my parents and grandparents, so my mom always encouraged me to live without regret. And my dad is also was an entrepreneur and an executive leader. And my grandparents really instilled in us strong values and integrity, which is core to who I am and who our business is. And then our beloved community, which my chosen family and friends, so my friend Gita, who really mentored and inspired me to start the firm, and Robin and Tamara and Milan and so many other friends who have really supported me along the way. And Maria Montessori, who inspired Global Citizen. So when my son was in Montessori school and I was leading essentially our DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion work at his school, learning about her teachings on global citizenry and how we teach and develop global citizens to act ethically in the world is really what inspired me to start my firm and to name it Global Citizen.
That is beautiful. That something that you are compelled to do, put your kid in school,
Yeah.
really helped form, or at least help you funnel that focus into action.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that. Tell us a little about your business. You talk about Global Citizen and sort of these great ideas that have pushed you in that. What's the heart of what you do?
Yeah.
Why do you get up out of bed every day and run to work?
Run. I am really driven by transformation and equity are really the through lines of what I've done throughout my life, both personally and professionally. And so with Global Citizen, as you did such a lovely job of introducing our firm, we're a strategic, equity-centered consulting, coaching, and training for transformation firm. And so we work with individuals, leaders, and teams and staff at organizations really in all sectors across the US and around the world. And we work at different levels. So I do individual and team leadership coaching and development. I work with leaders on the C-suite, so developing effective, inclusive leadership teams, work with organizations to conduct strategic assessments, strategic visioning, planning, and execution, landscape analyses to really help them understand what is their current state, and honestly, what's their current state. Bringing in an outside person as a consultant really enables me to conduct interviews, focus group discussions, survey responses, and really hear honestly about what their organizational state is, what people's experience is in their organization and with their leaders. And then again, conducting a landscape analysis allows me to look at what's the broader landscape that these leaders and organizations are operating in. What are the trends? What are changes afoot? What are risks and opportunities that they need to be aware of so that we can conduct strategic visioning, assessment, and planning to help them envision and then execute and move towards this future that they see for themselves.
So just to help parse out some of the very detailed information you gave us there, is that what I see is you like sort of learning about spaces.
Yes.
And connecting a way or a path to this vision.
Yes.
And the vision can be internal to the organization, but I see the Global Citizen and that idea that there's a better world out there, which I love having smart, capable people out in the world doing a lot of this, pushing through the chaos, pulling these visions together.
Yeah.
And it sounds like that's the kind of work that really makes you happy.
It does. And ultimately, I'm really driven by helping organizational leaders and teams gain clarity around their current state and their desired future state and how they're going to get there, because so often people take these kind of piecemeal approaches. They'll try this, they'll try that, but there's not a coherent strategy.
Okay.
So I love strategy. I'm really driven by that. Strategy for purpose and meaning and mission. And so purpose being for a better world, for equity, for everyone. And so how do we create that? Because too often I think people think that it's unattainable. And certainly there are a lot of goals that we might not reach in our lifetime, or our vision we may not fully achieve, but we have to be able to envision the world that we want and then figure out how we're going to work to create it. And I love collaborating with leaders on that and to help them see that your vision matters, that we can create a plan to help you get towards that vision, and that, again, we may not achieve all of it in our lifetime, but at least we're moving towards it. And we're also developing future leaders who will carry the torch.
So that sounds like so much of like that maybe there was a specific moment, I'm wondering, where you were like, oh, I see where this is lacking in the world, or where I can do this. Was there a specific event or?
It's not necessarily a specific event, but really my whole life I have been acutely attuned to disparities, to discrimination. I mean, I remember even as a child growing up as a white person in a predominantly white family, just being really aware of inequities around race and systemic racism, around gender. I was always a very strong woman. I always challenged my family members and then later organizational leaders to identify and address systemic biases, whether it was systemic racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, xenophobia. And I just think some of it is kind of how I'm wired. Some of it was my global upbringing. So my family moved around a lot, and including to London my middle school years. So and we traveled and we traveled a lot during those years as well. And those
So when you were in London, you got to go, like a lot of European countries, just be so close to London and then go to
Exactly.
France and wherever.
Yeah. So our family trips were around the UK and around Europe. Our school trips were to Greece and Crete and to Florence, Italy when I was in 6th grade and 7th grade. I mean, I went to the
different
American School in
experience.
London, which was really an international school of kids whose parents lived all over the world, and some of whom had never actually lived in the US. And so from a young age, I was learning French. I was traveling to different countries in a very international community. And so that also, I think, allowed me to step outside of my own culture and really question a lot about the cultural assumptions I was raised with in the US, to realize that the way the US does things are not always the best.
What is one of those as a kid that you were thinking, this seems a little bit better than what we did back in the States?
Yeah, definitely economic equity. And I was also an international exchange student in the Netherlands when I graduated from high school before I went to college. And I lived with a Dutch family, and there's nothing like living with another family to really make you question your family norms as well as your cultural norms. And a lot of people in the school were challenging US capitalism and really having me engage in debate with them about the merits of capitalism versus the merits of more of a socialist government and society. And a lot of the practices that the Dutch government and people were engaging in caused me to realize that I am really someone who values equity. I think that our circumstances of birth shouldn't determine our futures, that our identities around the race, ethnicity, gender that we're born into shouldn't predetermine the outcomes for us, that we should all have equitable opportunities to flourish and thrive. And so that being challenged around kind of the economic systems also caused me to look at broader systems, and again, systems of oppression and systems of equity.
That is very self-aware
Yeah.
for a young person,
Right.
right? We've had different guests talk about, that moment. And so for you, it's all woven into lots of different things because it's about economics. It's about your place as a foreigner in another country and
And
having,
being questioned, I mean, that forces you to start thinking about
does.
it, right?
right, because it's not the default.
Yeah, what we take for granted, or not everyone, but what many people in the U.S. may take for granted as the way to do things, the way systems are, the way societies are, obviously is not. And that really led me into studying and understanding intercultural competence and global competence, and then creating my firm's global competence model and training programs to really teach people that we need to understand and recognize diverse cultures, and that there isn't a superior culture and inferior culture, that there are these differences that we need to recognize and value, and then to really understand how do we create multicultural systems, whether they're multicultural organizations, multicultural schools, multicultural communities. And so that really informed my work around global competence.
So as you're growing up, at some point, we all figure out there's something about us that might be a little different.
Yeah.
We figured out, differently, right? It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, I've got this other thing going on. And what was the awakening that there was something else about who you were that just set you apart?
Yeah, I think that my identity as a U.S. citizen in the world, and really embracing my identity as a global citizen rather than only a U.S. citizen, because that is what resonated for me. There's so many cultures that resonate for me. And seemingly from birth, my best friend from elementary school, who I connected with later on Facebook, said, from 3rd grade, you were talking about being a Peace Corps volunteer in Africa. And it's like, how did I know? I don't have any family members who are in the Peace Corps. I didn't know anyone Well, I had family members one who was an ambassador and his wife, and they lived in different places, but I didn't have experience with the Peace Corps in Africa really in my family. So where did that idea come from at such a young age? And so global citizen identity, certainly my identity as a strong woman growing up in a family where mostly, but not all, of the men in my family were working outside the home, and many of the women were working as mothers and as caring for the home. And yet I always knew, and my aunt, though, was a teacher, and she did consulting for National Geographic, and she really inspired me to be a professional woman. And being a strong woman, and then coming out as a queer lesbian after college. But even in college was really, high school and college were really formative years around my identity as a feminist, and again, challenging systems of oppression around gender and for women and gender more broadly. And then coming out as a queer lesbian after college and realizing that that was another difference that I had been kind of working my way through around my own sexual identity and gender identity. And then as time has gone on, really interrogating my identity as a white person in a world with systemic racial oppression and white supremacy, and increasingly understanding about gender diversity and really supporting trans rights and the right for bodily autonomy and gender autonomy. And so it's been an evolution.
Yeah, I mean, you have this, I know that you worked at IPAS, which is, renowned for its women's, how do I say this? Think about what we did in Mexico, right?
Sexual reproductive health and
yes,
rights.
Thank you. Yeah. Sexual reproductive health and rights, which is, sad to say, not a universally accepted idea.
Sure.
And we see a lot of these rights being revoked inside of our own country. Absolutely. But I also see this as an interesting way for somebody who's queer, where reproductive rights are absolutely in the forefront, because you don't necessarily advocate for not having a family, but only for yourself, right? That would be. But the thing is, that's not who you are either, because you actually have a family, and you created a family in a way that I think is just an amazing conscious effort of creating family.
Yeah, very intentionally. I always knew I wanted to have a child or children. I thought growing up that I would likely adopt, but then my former partner, Jackie, really wanted us to have a child biologically, didn't want to carry. And I was very open to artificial insemination. And so we went that route, and we selected an African-American donor because she's African-American, and we wanted him to represent, I knew I would carry, so we wanted him to represent, our family cultures, and found a donor who was African-American, and it was a beautiful experience. It was really beautiful to be pregnant, to be able to carry our son. I'm one of the few women really in the world who's had one intended pregnancy in my lifetime, and then that resulted in the birth of a healthy baby, and my only child. I mean, for many women have experienced miscarriage and abortion and, a variety of different reproductive health experiences. And our son is 21, and he's a wonderful young man who we're just so incredibly proud of. And then to form this multiracial, queer, and straight, our son, extended family, and blended family in, a world that is where we're just experiencing so much discrimination. I remember with my former partner, we would go places as an interracial couple and then family, and just the assumptions people would make. People often assumed I wasn't Jaden's birth mother because he's biracial and presents as African-American, and I'm white. And so even the kids at his school would say, like, who's his real mommy? And, real, again, the ways that we don't authenticate, we don't recognize and validate families in all of our forms.
Right.
Yeah. And then the discrimination that Jackie and I would experience, where people thought assumed I was her social worker. And even my son, I brought him to an appointment when he was a young adult, and the person came in the room and said, "Are you his social worker?" to me. Wow. I said, "I'm his mother, and why are you assuming that I'm his social worker?"
Yeah, there are so many, interesting things. My cousin who also had a child that presented very, very white. And she would often get accosted for having this child with her. She's, darker complexion, we're about the same complexion. And it was just amazing the stories that I would hear.
Yeah.
And yes, they should be challenging if they think a child is in distress, but that was not necessarily the case when they were being challenged.
Yeah.
And I assume the same thing for you.
Yeah.
And so I hate that happened to you, but it does inform how you interact in the world.
Absolutely. I mean, these are the lived experiences and the stories that I bring to the work we do around addressing and mitigating biases, is knowing that we all have biases. It's natural and evolutionary that we've developed to think in biased ways. And there is a plus to that evolutionarily, but now there's a lot of harm that can also come from it. And so instructing people about, again, that you're not a bad person because you have biased thinking or thoughts, we all do, but what do we do with those? How do we recognize those biases? How do we interrupt them? How do we stop ourselves when we have the thought, which we all will have at some point? How do we stop ourselves and say, okay, I'm going to recognize what's happening and I'm going to interrupt it, I'm going to replace it, or I'm going to ask an open-ended question. I'm not going to make an assumption. And so this is the kind of training that we do for organizations and leaders.
And so, talking about when you look at these challenges, what kind of challenges do you find most rewarding when you get past, these ideas?
Yeah. Well, I love my leadership coaching, and I come off of each leadership call, a coaching call, just euphoric, because I get to work with either individuals or pairs. So sometimes, and I work with leaders at different levels. I want to say I teach leadership for master's students at UNC Chapel Hill. And I always tell my students, everyone is a leader at their level, because we need good leadership and we need good followership as well. We don't often learn about followership, ethical followership, because it takes leaders and followers to really create good leadership. And that everyone's a leader. And so I do leadership coaching and development at these different levels, either for more seasoned leaders or for emerging leaders, individually, sometimes in teams or pairs. If I have leaders who are at the same level, it's helpful for them to have individual leadership as well, coaching as well as group coaching, or again, in teams. And I find that really rewarding because so many of us have internalized those messages. So people are dealing with imposter syndrome or imposter systems, and these negative self-talk, these ways that we have internalized these negative messages about ourselves that are not true, but they are messages that we've, again, heard and internalized from outside systems. And so helping leaders understand what are those internalized messages and replace them with accurate messages, and then act on that and really be able to blossom into the leaders they were meant to be, is a beautiful process. And then working with teams in that way, where I've always been drawn to stigmatized topics, probably because of being a queer lesbian and because of being attuned to systemic racism from a young age. And so when teams or leaders come to me and say, we're having a lot of challenges, there's a lack of trust, our culture, we've got some culture issues, we've got people who are not on the same page, we don't have a shared vision or goal. I love that because I do. It's juicy, right? It's juicy. I like problem solving. And my father was a problem solver as an executive. So I think growing up, we heard a lot of his stories. And I like when, I don't like that people have the problems, but it's very satisfying to come in and be that active listener, to talk with individuals privately and really hear, the real story about this leader thinks they're so inclusive, but they don't listen, they interrupt, they don't respond well when we propose alternative ideas. People's self-perception and then the perception of their teams are often quite different. And it's important for me to be able to hear honestly from their team members about what their experiences are, and then bring that to the leader privately and provide private supportive coaching to them to say, there's some ways that you can improve your leadership. It's going to make you better. It's going to make your team and your organizations better. That's immensely satisfying.
What kind of, without naming names, what are some of the messages that you've heard back? I found myself, blah, blah, blah.
From the leadership The leaders I've
when they have a
coached.
breakthrough? Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, so one person I'm working with now is a Black woman leader and so incredibly capable, so skilled and so successful. When I ask her to tell me a story about what she's doing on her team, what she's doing in her work out in the world, and she tells me these incredible stories, and then I hear what her direct boss, who's very high up in the organization, is saying to her, and there's just a total mismatch that they are not seeing the leader who she really is, and she's internalized that. So helping, and when she first came to me, she said, I feel stuck. I feel unseen, unheard. I feel like my value really, like they're not seeing the leader who I really am. And I agree with her. And so if we can work on her helping to manage up and helping to shape the environment. If it's not the right environment, sometimes it means that it's time for a change. And then working with that person to help them learn the confidence, to gain the confidence and the accurate self-understanding and the recognition that they have so many more opportunities, that they're not stuck, is just, again, incredibly gratifying. And then working with a pair of emerging leaders who are this is a different organization, a global organization that works broadly on international development and evaluation. And that these pair of leaders were emerging and were wanting to be, their senior leadership wisely recognized the importance of investing in leaders, in their leadership to help them develop them into more senior leaders. And their team was lacking in some psychological safety. Again, the senior leadership had good intentions. They had some good practices, but there were things they were doing where the team wasn't feeling trusted fully to be in charge, that there was a little micromanaging happening. And so just helping to coach them, again, the senior leaders and the emerging leaders, on how to create more psychological safety on their team, how to trust their emerging leaders to take on more and more responsibility while providing some safeguards so that they had some support and mentorship. There's a whole process we go through to help develop these teams and organizations.
Listening to the types of, sticking points for the companies, the people that you're working for, really is very eye-opening to me, because you're able to vocalize and put words to things that I sort of just are watching and trying to put together in my own head about what's happening.
Yeah.
And so I find it amazing that you really do have a full-on grasp, and are helping me just sitting here think about how to weave a lot of this in and what challenges are actually there. So thank you.
Sure,
I appreciate that.
Maybe we could go back to that issue of representation and inclusion that you were asking about. And so for me, it wasn't a moment, but just recognizing the data for one thing. I take a real data-driven approach, and also a really customized approach. So every organization is different and unique, and there are a lot of similar patterns. So it's kind of a both and.
Okay.
And that's where the strategic assessment comes in. And that could be a rapid assessment, or it could be a more comprehensive assessment to understand in your organization what are the particular dynamics, because we have to understand what the problems are before we can develop appropriate solutions. How often do people come in with a solution and they really haven't done their work to understand what the problems are?
I have a hammer. Who's the nail?
Yeah, exactly. I'm right. I'm going to look around for this nail.
Right.
So that's not, we do a highly customized work. Again, we have our own systems and processes and forms and templates that we use, but every organization is unique. So we're going to understand the unique dynamics in that organization, and then we're going to develop a really tailored, customized solution for each organization. And we know, though, that when we look at the data, both nationally and globally, that senior leadership, be it C-suite, boards of directors, by and large, are not representative of the diversity in their organizations, let alone of their constituents or their stakeholders that they're aiming to serve. And that is a problem. And representation does matter. This is why this whole anti-DEI war that the ultra-right conservative wings have been successfully waging are really concerning to me, because they've been unfortunately extremely effective in their messaging, this whole anti-woke and just dismissing the incredibly important strategic work of diversity, equity, and inclusion as though we're being woke and we're
wrecking what system is in place.
and this illusion of pitting diversity against meritocracy, which in and of itself is highly problematic because too often I have leaders, often predominantly white leaders, who will say to me, well, yes, we value diversity, but not at the expense of merit and excellence. And then I come back and ask them, why would you assume that having a more diverse leadership team, a more diverse organization would necessarily reduce your merit or your excellence?
Right.
Are you assuming, so there are a couple of things in that. One is this assumption that predominantly white people have inherently more merit. Very few people, some people would say that. Very few people would say that consciously, but isn't that the assumption you're making, that if you work to increase the diversity of your leadership team, that you would necessarily have to sacrifice excellence? Isn't that what?
I know. It's like, and when you said your biases, everybody has
Yes,
biases,
we
and
all
it's like,
do.
but you don't realize it's a bias until you have to come up against. Because if you're hearing all of those things
Yep.
back, you've already decided what the merit is, where we're evaluating, what everything is,
What the default
and you
is.
never saw outside of that.
Exactly.
And that's the big thing when you said that. It was like, because you got great training at a very young age
Yeah.
of being questioned, and then of course that pushed you into data because
Yeah.
as a child you're going, oh well, how do I say, and you've got to weigh everything
Yeah.
data driven.
Yeah, yeah.
And so that, I mean, how could you go into anything else? It's pretty much.
I mean, I do feel chosen for this work.
I mean, and it becomes a very what did you call
Zone
it?
of genius.
Your zone of genius.
It's genius.
I mean, and that you get jazzed by it. I mean, like
do,
right
I
now,
love
it's
it.
like
It's my
when you were
purpose.
saying,
Yes. Yeah.
like you hear all these problems. Oh, we're about to come to you with these are our issues,
Yeah.
and it's like, oh, I know exactly where we're going. We're gonna, I can
Yeah.
help you with this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where instead of right now being depressed about things, it's like it's also just the thing of saying, well, if people are reaching out, that's great on its own.
Sure.
Because you're looking outside.
Yeah. Yeah.
What were you going to say?
And people,
No, go ahead. No, go ahead.
well, people at different levels are reaching out. And that's where sometimes it is the senior leadership, and then sometimes it's more middle management who are recognizing what's happening.
Which
and
that's fantastic.
yeah, it's fantastic and it's challenging because I have to then work with the seniors leadership to
yeah.
help them understand and breaking through a lot of those barriers where, again, those false messages of if I'm biased, then I'm a bad person. If my senior leadership team is not currently as diverse as it needs to be, then I must have done something wrong to allow us to get here. I'm not a racist, I'm not a sexist, all these messages. And that's where the anti-woke campaign and the anti-DEI campaigns are so dangerous because they're perpetuating all these false messages about what diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging work are, the strategies are, and playing into people's fears and people's sense of, but I'm a good person. And so I can assure them, you are a good person. You're a good person who is flawed, as we all are, as deeply imperfect humans. And you have been working out of these assumptions, out of these biases that we all have. And so let's work together to learn what those are, to unlearn those, and to practice something different. It takes a lot of courage.
It does.
It does. And so there we do the 6 signature traits of inclusive leadership, which Deloitte Consulting advanced. And so one of those elements of inclusive leadership is courage, because you are bucking the status quo. You're doing a lot of self-examination. Yeah, you're pointing here. It is. It involves a lot of self-work. I will say we've been very successful. There are times where the leaders that we're working with falter in their courage, and we need to really bolster them because it's a lot to take this on. And even those leaders who come to us and say, we want you to help make us better, because we recognize that when we can really embrace diversity, when we can really advance inclusion and belonging so that people can flourish, because let's face it, as humans, we're wired for connection. We're wired for belonging.
Community.
Yes, community. It's literally how we're wired as beings. Not only humans, other creatures are wired for belonging. We want to belong to our family systems. We want to belong to our organizational systems. So we know that to flourish, people need that. I just went to a leadership summit yesterday, forum, and the speaker was talking about dignity, which was very informative around the understanding that we all have an inherent dignity and that we often unintentionally will breach others' dignity. And it's not something we can't take away anyone's dignity, because that's inherent. It's
there.
Inherent to who we are, but we can definitely harm others' dignity. And that is a key piece in the organization too. Some people see this as a nice to have, but it's not. It's mission critical. It's mission critical. If you want to succeed, the evidence on advancing diversity, equity, inclusion in organizations is clear and overwhelming.
Overwhelming.
Those organizations that have diverse and inclusive and representative senior leadership outperform those that don't.
Right. Economic and socially, and
that's right.
Spiritually, if you will.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there is a spiritual element to this as well. And this is internal work, both individually, interpersonally, intersystems. Like you said, within the organization, we do also look at their external offerings, their programs, their services, what they're offering out in the world, and whether those are in alignment. So another key, I'd say, in addition to equity and transformation, another key theme for me is around alignment. And as someone who practices mindfulness and meditation and yoga, also knowing that when we as individuals are operating in alignment, we're in a place of peace. We're really operating with a sense of peace and well-being. And that extends up to the organizational level too. I work with those leaders to help them clarify and then make adjustments to operate in alignment with their mission, vision, values, policies, systems, and structures for a better world. Yeah,
I love all that, and I love that you're doing that. I don't know. It's like it's like breathing for a country.
I know. I'm like that's a heavy weight.
I know. I'm glad that you're out there. So we want to circle back a little bit and talk about media and using media and where representation is. How do you use media in what you do?
Yeah, a number of ways. So there's a whole methodology that I developed when I was at IPAS, and I now do on a consulting basis, which is called Values Clarification for Action and Transformation. And so it's a whole methodology that I and others developed around helping people clarify their deeply held values and then understand the realities of how systems are operating in the world and then act in alignment with those values. It's a very powerful process that has a lot of applications. I developed it at IPAS for work around abortion and sexual reproductive health and rights to help healthcare providers, to help policymakers, to help community members, people in the legal system understand what their values are, and then what the realities are for women and girls and people with uteruses in their country or in their communities who are needing access to safe and healthy abortion care, which is a human right and is part of a health system.
Yes.
Health is a human right. And then to act in alignment with that. And so I developed it around abortion care, but it's really applicable in many, many different ways. So we can apply it to immigration. We could apply it to different policies. And so we use storytelling in that I will show a documentary film that's a short film. I use what I call, I'll use something to spark dialogue. And so that could be a headline from a news clip. It could be a photo, a very evocative photo. It could be a video clip that quickly, kind of succinctly summarizes the problem and then I engage them in deep reflection and dialogue, and then moving them towards action based on that. So it's really that media is so important to help us connect on a human level. There's a documentary film clip that I use that was made in Ethiopia, but I've used it all over the world. And I tested it to see different audiences in Asia and Latin America, different continents. Do you resonate with these girls, with these women? Do you see yourself in them, with these healthcare providers? And universally, people said yes. The story is universal. The particulars are particular to this town in Ethiopia, but that's the power of art and media and storytelling. Paintings. I love using art to help people connect with each other, with artists, with humanity, and then apply that in a very practical way of what does this mean about ourselves? What does this mean for our work and practices in the world?
I would love to get the short list of what media you have collected for your for this activity, because I would just love to see what you've got in the bucket.
Yeah.
So when you do some of the calls and stuff, do you do any of the live video or like streaming chat, video chats and that sort of thing?
I have done some, LinkedIn lives and Facebook and Instagram lives. I'd like to do more of that.
I think it would be extremely interesting to me. So when you do that, include me in your announcements, and we will absolutely push people in that direction.
Yeah. Well, you all could help me, I'm sure.
Oh yes, we have the capacity
Yes,
to
you do.
assist with
Well,
that.
it's that cracking. It's like the excitement for me is when you said about the cracking of actually thinking and questioning.
Yes.
Right. It's like that's like my mom, she attributed her father invested in the first television that anybody had, right, in their area. And she watched it, and it put her up against all of the things that she had been taught by her parents.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden she's like, well, how, as she was a good Catholic schoolgirl, and it's like, how could she felt like she was like, a woman should have the right to whatever she chooses.
Right.
How do I align that and reconcile it? And she did, and she could explain it to people, and she could say, look, I for myself probably would never choose that, but there's no way I'm going to tell another woman.
Right.
And I will go out and I will march and I will defend that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that, figuring out on their own when they're not bobbing around and hearing the same thing said back to them.
Yes.
Cracking outside of that and hearing a small voice that helps you start going, well, is that a fact? Should I question? Is being woke a bad thing?
Right.
So let me just add, this is sparking an idea for me in the fact that not just representation about, the color of our skin or the, where we're originating from, but the idea that we are representing a challenge to your bias. Because I think that can be more intentional in what we put out and what we talk about. And you have really helped me start thinking a lot of different ways. So this has been an amazing conversation.
Yeah. I mean, I'm very attuned to that when I consume media, whether it is images or videos or stories, I do automatically think about representation. You look at advertisements and you look at if they have a group of people.
Right.
Do they center the white person, or do they have a person of color in the middle? Is the white person more to the side? Gender representation. These are, again, all these ways that biases are so embedded in how we think and then the products we create. And so being more intentional is incredibly important. And it also it does make the world a better place, knowing that people, because we know the importance of seeing ourselves represented in these different positions. So for young people to see themselves represented in senior leadership in very visible and clear ways is incredibly important. For people in organizations to see themselves represented in senior leadership and know this is possible.
Yes.
Yeah, is incredibly important.
And that's one of the things that we want to advocate for LGBTQ and people of color who are leaders to step in front of the camera, because it's not just
There's more. You're
there's more.
representing.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a different representation that happens. And so we are advocates for exactly that.
Which is so beautiful that you all are doing this. And I do work, I serve on the board of my alum, Duke and UNC. I'm very involved in the alum associations because it's so important for students to see queer alum who are flourishing and thriving out in the world, and they have a lot of questions.
With your own company.
With our own company, exactly. That you can found and run a successful company. You can be a business leader. You can be out and proud, because that's a lot of the questions students are asking is, can I be out in the workplace professionally? Can I found and run a business? Can I be a leader in an organization and be out as a queer LGBTQ plus person? And yes, yes, you can. And there's more. I mean, there's context, and globally in different cultural contexts, there are a lot of nuances to that. And yes, so it is important for us to be a role model, be a mentor, and also to engage in intergenerational learning, which I find, that's why I love teaching and working with my students and younger generations, because there's so much we can learn. And I do work a lot on intergenerational conflicts and resolution and relationships in the workplace, because we have over 5 generations in the workplace for the first time ever.
Wow.
5 generations in the workplace.
And that's a go-to for people being argumentative and going like, oh, well, they're coming in and they're, let me, all these gens, let me put them under what gen they are.
Exactly.
And that'll either excuse their behavior or explain.
Instead of recognizing how much we have to learn from each other.
Right.
And it happens in every direction. Sometimes younger people may dismiss older people's contributions, thinking, what do you know? That's not how we do it anymore. Yeah. Older people can dismiss younger people, saying like, oh, you're just a Gen X, whatever, Gen Z, what do you know? But there's so much learning we have. Why wouldn't we want to learn from each other?
It's like you're running around in the same group, and it's like, oh, you can have access to someone else's brain who doesn't think like yours at all.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's
it's critical.
There's a whole thing there, right? So
yeah.
Well, time goes by so fast when we're on here. We're having a good time, and we love having a chance to introduce our audience to amazing, capable business owners that show up authentically and that are making a difference, not just for us here in the States, but globally.
Yeah.
We want to thank you for coming to Change the Real.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's really my pleasure. And I hope folks can reach out to us at info@globalcitizenllc.com.
Yeah, so where can we see you coming up in the near future? I know you do webinars.
Yeah,
and I know
we do virtual webinars and workshops, in-person trainings and workshops as well, and of course, consulting and coaching. So really encourage people to reach out to us at info@globalcitizenllc.com. info@globalcitizenllc.com.
And that'll be in the show notes.
LinkedIn and also social media. We always promote our upcoming events. And so reach out for leadership coaching, for organizational consulting, training, for webinars, workshops, in-person, virtual, for leadership team retreats, etc.
To help make the world a better place.
Yeah,
for a better world.
It's a better global place. Well, we appreciate you, Katherine.
My pleasure.
We love this.
Yeah, this is really fun.
We want to thank you for tuning in to our channel. Thank you.
Thanks for watching this episode of Change the Real.
If you liked it, hit subscribe, share the episode, or drop a comment. We actually read them.
Connect with us or any of our guests on LinkedIn. Check the show notes for links.
And if you're done with DIY and ready to record something that matters in a safe, inclusive space, check out our studio at VelasquezMedia.com.
Remember,
Representation starts here.